spite of the fact that he was wrangling, he was doing so only in the most amicable fashion possible. Never did he say outright, "You played the wrong card at such and such a point." No, he always employed some such phrase as, "You permitted yourself to make a slip, and thus afforded me the honour of covering your deuce." Indeed, the better to keep in accord with his antagonists, he kept offering them his silver enamelled snuff-box, at the bottom of which lay a couple of violets placed there for the sake of their scent. In particular did the newcomer pay attention to landowners Manilov and Sobakevitch, so much so that his haste to arrive on good terms with them led to his leaving the president and the postmaster rather in the shade. At the same time, certain questions which he put to those two landowners evinced not only curiosity, but also a certain amount of sound intelligence, for he began by asking them how many peasant souls each of them possessed, and how their affairs happened at present to be situated, and then proceeded to enlighten himself also as their standing and their families. Indeed, it was not long before he had succeeded in fairly enchanting his new friends. In particular did Manilov, a man still in his prime, and possessed of a pair of eyes which, sweet as sugar, blinked whenever he laughed, find himself unable to make enough of his enchanter. Clasping Chichikov long and fervently by the hand, he besought him to do him, Manilov, the honour of visiting his country house, which he declared to lie at a distance of not more than 15 versts from the boundaries of town. And in return, Chichikov averred, with an exceedingly affable bow and a most sincere handshake, that he was prepared not only to fulfil his friend's behest, but also to look upon the fulfilling of it as a sacred duty. In the same way, Sobakevitch said to him laconically, "And do you pay me a visit?" and then proceeded to shuffle a pair of boots of such dimensions that to find a pair to correspond with them would have been indeed difficult, more especially at the present day, when the race of epic heroes is beginning to die out in Russia. Next day Chichikov dined and spent the evening at the house of the chief of police, a residence where, 3 hours after dinner, everyone sat down to whist, and remained so seated until 2 o'clock in the morning. On this occasion Chichikov made the acquaintance of, among others, a landowner named Nozdrev, a dissipated little fellow of 30 who had no sooner exchanged 3 or 4 words with his new acquaintance than he began to address him in the second person singular. Yet although he did the same to the chief of police and the public prosecutor, the company had no sooner seated themselves at the card table than both the one and the other of these functionaries started to keep a careful eye upon Nozdrev's tricks, and to watch practically every card which he played. The following evening Chichikov spent with the president of the local council, who received his guests, even though the latter included 2 ladies, in a greasy dressing-gown. Upon that followed an evening at the vice-governor's, a large dinner-party at the house of the commissioner of taxes, a smaller dinner-party at the house of the public prosecutor, a very wealthy man, and a subsequent reception given by the mayor. In short, not an hour of the day did Chichikov find himself forced to spend at home, and his return to the inn became necessary only for the purposes of sleeping. Somehow or other he had landed on his feet, and everywhere he figured as an experienced man of the world. No matter what the conversation chanced to be about, he always contrived to maintain his part in the same. Did the discourse turn upon horse-breeding? Upon horse-breeding he happened to be particularly well qualified to speak. Did the company fall to discussing well-bred dogs? At once he had remarks of the most pertinent kind possible to offer. Did the company touch upon a prosecution which had recently been carried out by the excise department? Instantly he showed that he too was not wholly unacquainted with legal affairs. Did an opinion chance to be expressed concerning billiards? On that subject too he was at least able to avoid committing a blunder. Did a reference occur to virtue, concerning virtue, he hastened to deliver himself in a way which brought tears to every eye. Did the subject in hand happen to be the distilling of brandy? Well, that was a matter concerning which he had the soundest of knowledge. Did anyone happen to mention customs officials and inspectors? From that moment he expatiated as though he too had been both a minor functionary and a major. Yet a remarkable fact was the circumstance that he always contrived to temper his omniscience with a certain readiness to give way, a certain ability so to keep a rein upon himself that never did his utterances become too loud or too soft, or transcend what was perfectly befitting. In a word, he was always a gentleman of excellent manners, and every official in the place felt pleased when he saw him enter the door. Thus the governor gave it as his opinion that Chichikov was a man of excellent intentions. The public prosecutor said that he was a good man of business. The chief of gendarmerie that he was a man of education. The president of the local council that he was a man of breeding and refinement, and the wife of the chief of gendarmerie that his politeness of behaviour was equalled only by his affability of bearing. Nay, even Sobakevitch, who as a rule never spoke well of any one, said to his lanky wife when, on returning late from the town, he undressed and betook himself to bed by her side, "My dear, this evening, after dinner with the chief of police, I went on to the governor's, and met there, among others, a certain Paul Ivanovitch Chichikov, who is a collegiate councillor and a very pleasant fellow." To this his spouse replied, "Hm!" and then dealt him a hearty kick in the ribs. Such were the flattering opinions earned by the newcomer to the town, and these opinions he retained until the time when a certain specialty of his, a certain scheme of his, the reader will learn presently what it was, plunged the majority of the townsfolk into a sea of perplexity. End of Part 1. Chapter 1.